Kaleidoscope cards. I love them. Let me show you how, and make sure to keep watching to find out how you can be eligible to win some fantastic prizes. This is the Sizzix Stamp and Stencil tool. You've seen me use it as a stamp positioner and as a stencil base, and I've done a review of it in a previous video in comparison with other stamp positioning tools. But now it has a new friend. This is the Stamp and Spin tool, which is really just like another lid for the positioner, but it has a twist. You can use the wheel to turn your stamps and create things like wreaths and kaleidoscopes. It comes with this piece of thick acetate that you can place here on the end to protect your sticky surface. I'm going to use this fun little stamp that's part of the umbrella image from one of the sets being released today as part of this Sizzix Catherine Pooler collection. This is my very first time playing with this, and I love that I can remove the lid to place the stamp exactly where I want it. The circle has lines on it so you can see how far out you are from the center, and you can put it right in the center if you want as well. I'll show you that in a few minutes. This tool has a base that's big enough for a full sheet of cardstock, and that's fun because I know if I put my design in the center, I'll be able to cut it up and get 4 cards out of one panel. So I stamped it once with Party Dress, and then I turned the wheel. There are little handles here that you can hold while you're turning it, and the wheel kind of clicks into place at the next position, so you can't get it wrong. I continued along, making my first kind of geometric wreath, and you can see I'm also creating an 8-pointed star there in the center. Once I saw this, I knew I couldn't stop there, so I moved the stamp outward a little, so it's still overlapping that first party dress stamp a little bit. I'm using Tiki torch this time, and I'll get kind of a blend of the colors where they join up. Watching this, I can see that the action looks a little jerky, and it is a little bit, but that's the click of the wheel moving into place, and as I said, that means you can't get it in the wrong place. I moved the stamp further out and I started a row of Cummerbund. Is it a row? I guess it's not, but you know what I mean. Isn't this design awesome? I think the little spaces where there's overlap actually make it look dimensional. This may be my new favorite stamp, you guys. I love this. I took the panel away and I cut it into 4, and then I flipped them over with the pattern in the outside corners, and I taped the panel back together with some repositionable tape. I've done this before with my Stencils 360. I'm not going to lie, this took a little bit of brain power, but I finally figured out that as long as the pattern is on the 4 outside corners, you're good, and it doesn't matter how you got there. So once I taped it together on the back, I put the panel back in the center of the tool and I did a little more stamping. This time I used something borrowed for my first go around, and I admit that for most of these I am stamping twice because my ink pads are in need of a little top up. I really need to build a habit of just stopping and refilling them a bit, but today I was super impatient to see how this was going to turn out. Once I was done with that circle, I replaced the stamp, this time with more overlap to see how that looked, and I did refill my cummerbund in hopes that I wouldn't have to stamp it twice, but I still did. I hadn't conditioned this stamp at all, and the ink was beading up a little bit, so I just stamped again to make sure I got complete coverage. I went back and did a third row of stamping with Party Dress, but I went closer to the center this time and pretty much filled that center area in. This is when I noticed that even though the turning mechanism is there in the center, it's actually smooth enough to put the stamp on it so you can start your pattern from the center and work outwards if you want. I stamped this one in Tiki torch and that created another fun overlapped look. Next, I removed the tape from the back of the panels, and now I have 4 fun, beachy looking panels to use as my card fronts. I missed recording how I used one of the towel stamps and some blackjack ink to add some graphic stripes to each of the panels, but I really like the look I got. And then it was time to finish off with some of the fun, summery, beachy sentiments included in this collection. I stamped them all with blackjack ink, and I used the spinning lid without spinning it, just like a regular positioner. At one point I noticed that my sticky mat had lost its stick right there in the center, so I just moved my cardstock over to the left and I was able to stamp there. To add more color, I created some mats in the 4 colors I had used by swiping my ink pads directly onto the edges of white card panels. I love doing this because then my mats match my stamping exactly. And before assembling the cards, I used the new pool deck stencil to add some striped details to the mats. This tool has 2 little pegs you can see there on the left that help you align layering stencils perfectly. Sizzix even has adapters that you can use for stencils from other companies that don't come with the holes. I was kind of working backwards here. I knew where the stencil was going, so I lined up my cardstock underneath it. But you can use these stencils without using the pegs, especially if, like here, you're just doing one layer. This is just a fun way to add a little bit of interest to the mat that ties back into the stripes on the panels. Isn't it neat to see how the different color mats change the feeling of these cards? From cool to hot, but they're all still bright and summery. Perfect for beach days. Here's the next kaleidoscope I stamped. I won't show you all the stamping, but this time I started from the center and I worked out to the edge of the lid, repeating the colors as I went. This time I only cut 2 card panels out of it to show that you can get a different look by choosing different areas of the pattern to use. You could cut it right out of the center and get a fully covered panel, but I wanted to get at least 2 cards out of this. This time I'm using some older sentiments, and I repeated my sentiment by using the grid on the sticky sheet and moving my cardstock down by the same number of squares each time. You can also move the lid instead of the cardstock, which gives you absolute precision, but of course you're limited in spacing to the space between the 2 hingy things on the door. And next we come to the one small problem I have with this tool. The sticky from the mat transfers to the back of the panel. You can just rub it with your hand or an adhesive eraser and it comes right off, but I wish it just stayed better on the sticky sheet. For the other card, I used an old favorite Catherine Pooler stamp from way back. I love this font. It feels so happy and friendly. To add a little bit of definition without having to add another layer, I gently press the edges of the 2 panels into my blackjack ink. It sometimes takes a little bit of practice to get the pressure exactly right, but I do like this look. I love how this pattern looks almost random, but still somehow doesn't feel too chaotic. They're happy and full of life and energy. Now for something a little different. I grabbed this little umbrella die and some strips of cardstock. I started by coloring one strip with each color, so Something Borrowed, Cummerbund, Party Dress, and Tiki Torch. And then while they were drying, I cut the die from the white strip 5 times. Then I cut 5 from each color, and in the end, I got this. I also cut a bunch of circles that were almost the exact same size as the umbrella shape. I find that it's easier to put these together if I have a backing panel. And now the fun part, putting them all together. I put some glue all over the solid white circle, and then I started from the outside, trying to line up that narrow die cut so the circle underneath won't really show through. Then I worked my way through, just making sure I had one of every color. There were actually 6 little die cuts, but I left the tiny center dot in the next one, so the solid center, I guess, really is 2 pieces of the same color. But that way, every one of my little shapes has every color included on it. This work is a little fiddly, but it is really fun to see them coming together. As I built up my collection, I felt like they were almost looking like granny squares. Well, I guess they're not granny squares. Is there such a thing as granny circles? I did some quick measuring and I figured out that a 4x4 grid of my granny circles fits perfectly onto a 3 3/4 inch square panel of cardstock. Even though I know I'm going to put this panel onto a white card base, I find that by using the panel, knowing that the 16 umbrellas fit perfectly on it, that helps me with getting them all lined up pretty straight and evenly. Also, having them on a white background helps where I didn't get things lined up perfectly, and you can maybe see that white circle peeking around a little bit around the die cut umbrella shapes. That just disappears on a white background. I used some foam tape to pop them all up. For my sentiment, I used an older Hugs die. This one has a shadow and the letters cut separately, so I cut 2 shadows, one to be the backer, and then I cut the letters from the second shadow. I swiped blackjack ink on the outline and the center of the G, and then I put glue all over my backer. Again, I could have made that blackjack as well, at least the very edges, for maybe a cleaner look. Then I put the blackjack outline onto the sticky backer, but I didn't press it down too hard in case I need to move it as I put in all the white letters. Sometimes these narrow outlines can seem to stretch a little bit. I popped up the word over top of my umbrellas. You could leave a row of them out if you wanted to save some for another card, and put the sentiment in that space instead, but I like the look of the full grid. Aren't these fun? I've been playing with some other color combinations too. This video is part of a hop celebrating the debut release of Catherine Pooler Designs products with Sizzix, and there's prizes. I've put all the details for the hop in the description below, including the link to the next video, so be sure to hop along and comment for a chance to win. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.